Hi, how are you doing? Take a breather before you enter into this space. Today I have a video that is surely going to be well received. I'm sure everybody is going to agree with me, and we're all going to get along so harmoniously in the comments, because today we are talking about classics. Now, I had seen, or I didn't fully watch it, but I had seen a presentation of Jack Edwards' video talking about books that he thinks will become modern classics, so that is the inspiration for this. I did also watch the full video done by a movie reviewer talking about movies that he thinks will become classics. So there's a couple of inspirational ideas behind this. Maybe if you want to watch those, it might be a little bit better. I'm just gonna have a lot of fun with this, and hopefully we agree on some things. I do have some reasoning behind the books that I've chosen, so it's not just like, oh my god, it's my favorite, I love it, it's like the best book of all time. I'd be interested to see what books you think deserve to be on this list, but I think I have a pretty good foundation, or at least a starting point for books that I think would be good. Also, another disclaimer, I haven't read every single book in the world. It's shocking, and it's very brave of me to say that. I know. I'm just as baffled as you are. I haven't read every single book, so if a book that you like hasn't made it onto the list, I probably haven't read it. I have 14 books on here, but what I want to extend this list to encompass is the authors as well. I haven't read every single book by specific authors that are on here, and I think some of their books might be better suited to be deemed the classic, but I think that these authors and or the books on here will be viable options to be considered classics. So now that the air is fully clear, let's get into my very brief 14 book list. Number 14, The Shards by Bret Easton Ellis. Don't you dare come at me, okay? I am a huge Bret Easton Ellis fan. I've sung his praises in multiple videos. For me, The Shards was a new feat for him. The Shards follows a group of students in the 80s. One of them is called Brett, quite literally is channeling himself in this, and it follows this group through the scandalous lives of high school, the affluent neighborhoods, the outcasts, and the people that they associate themselves with. There's also a murderer. Is it one of the other students? Who knows? I think that this is my choice for Bret Easton Ellis because he has already established himself as a classic king, right? I think it would be a little bit silly to say that American Psycho isn't going to be considered a classic, whether you love it or hate it, if not just for the fact that the movie is already a classic. That was in the 90s, though. I think this new generation of Brett, this breaking through of Brett, is going to be established in The Shards. I think that this is a fun book. I think it's really fun. I don't think he's taking himself too seriously. And I think it's interesting to look at a prodigy after they've gone over the hill of what people might see as their peak success. This is a really introspective book by Ellis, and I love this. So number 14, come at me. Number 13, 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. This is in the same boat as Ellis, where this is an author who I think I would say in the 80s, 90s, already established themselves as a prolific and amazing writer for a generation. I would say that some of those books in the 80s and 90s are going to be considered classics. I would say 1Q84 is Murakami's magnum opus. It's a massive book, but I always suggest this to people if they're looking to get into big books, if they're looking for a place to start, if they're looking for a world to inhabit for a little while, because this is very long, but it presents itself in a way that is easy, and you don't feel like you're getting too overwhelmed with information. And I think if you even pick this up as your first Murakami, you'd be just fine. This is like a science fiction book. This is just fully imaginary and fun. Those two authors definitely live in a world where they have classics already, but I would say for their newer generations, those are the books. A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. You hate to see it coming, don't you? Everybody's talked about this book till they've literally wept. I remember this was the first book that I encountered on the internet that showed what books can do to you. It was almost like a trend to read this book. It was a book that you filmed yourself crying, reading, I did it as well. Did I film myself crying? Potentially. But I definitely it was one of my first videos. I made a video about reading A Little Life because I was so persuaded by the internet presence of it. And I think that alone is what's going to make this a classic. I think even after maybe its shelf life has potentially expired, there's going to be those videos of people online sobbing to this book, and that is going to just carry it to the next generation. There's an innate appeal to this book, the curiosity behind why it is so dark and traumatizing for the reader, and I think that's what's going to make it a classic. This is about a group of friends. One of them has an incredibly mysterious past. It's all about childhood trauma and friendship, and it's over 800 pages long. It takes place in New York City. It's a great book. I always think I want to go back and reread it, see how I receive it now, and maybe one day, I think once I hit a certain number of Patreon members, I'm going to release that original OG video on there so you can see just my little humble beginnings. Yeah. The Perks of Being a Wallflower. This was published in 1999, so this is right on the cusp of what I think would be considered 2000s and onward classics. But the reason that I put this on here is because I think we always look at classics and we think of them as very mature novels, but there are a couple of young person's books that enter into that world of classic reading. A lot, I would say, actually. Now we're going to have different varieties of young adult fiction and children's books that are going to enter into what we consider modern classics. Hunger Games, Harry Potter, Twilight, would that be considered a classic? I mean, I'm sure if we're just going off of popularity, those ones would definitely be a part of that conversation. But for me, the book that I think moved me and took me was The Perks of Being a Wallflower. If you haven't read this book, it's all about a young boy, again, dealing with something traumatic, writing to an anonymous friend and experiencing high school, learning who he is, finding this outcast friend group. And if you resonated with that book at all, you probably ended up being a little bit of a weirdo on the internet. I'm sure it resonated with an entire group of people, and that will take it to classic status. Sue me. The next book that I'm putting on here is the beginning of a series. And I'm putting this on here because I'm so shocked at how popular this is. Every time I walk into a bookstore, it feels like this particular book and this series of books has a whole section dedicated to it. I only read the first book in the series, so I really can't have too much of an opinion about it, aside from I didn't like it. Maybe the other books are better, but I'm putting this on here because I think that there's a fandom surrounding this book, and I think that has to be appreciated, and I think it's sold over 1 million books worldwide, and that is Before the Coffee Gets Cold. Now, is this my first choice to be on this list? Not necessarily, but I'm not making this list based on books that only I love. I think it's important to look at books that maybe you don't love, and understanding the cultural significance that they have. This book just is everywhere, and it's just only expanding. I think there's maybe 6 books that are a part of this now, and I think to have that much passion behind continually putting out a new version of this story is impressive. This is about, well, at least Before the Coffee Gets Cold. I don't know what the other books are about, but this particular book is about a cafe where you have the ability to time travel and you have to just be back before the coffee gets cold. I found it a little bit dull. I found it a little bit depressing. Lots of people love it. Well, this is more of a author introduction, but the only book that I've read from this author is The Trees by Percival Everett. But I'm going to put probably the one that Everett will be known for classically, at least in this post-2000 generation, is James. He just won the Pulitzer Prize for it, and it's nothing but positive, glowing reviews of that book. Trees, I talked about it a lot on this channel recently. I included it in my short books that you can read in a day. But James, which is the book that I think is going to be considered the classic by Everett, is a retelling of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, which is in itself a classic. James is just telling that story from a different lens. I think that Everett has just further exploded onto the literary scene. He's always been there, so it would be a little bit odd to say that only now would his books be considered classics, but I think just how widespread his novel James became is going to make that a modern classic. Again, The Trees is the only book that I've read of his, but I do think that his whole library is worth checking out. I'm especially keen to pick up Erasure. I have a lot of desire to see what that story is, and I like his writing. He's a great writer. Now we are at number 9. And this book is probably the most fitting classic, right? I think when we think of a classic, we think of, shirts like this, now that I'm looking at it. We think of gowns, we think of people talking in these sort of old-timey accents, and now we've evolved past that. Now we're living in the modern world of technology. So when we look at classics from 2000 onward, you have to take that into account. This next book is probably the most classic feeling, and that is Trust by Hernan Diaz. This book is about a wealthy tycoon in New York City, his path to success, his downfall, and the reality of how he actually found his success. Of course, it's written in 3 different sections, 3 different narratives, and that is how the truth is revealed. This book, again, is a huge book, but reads so quickly. I think that the triple narrative makes it interesting. I wasn't so in love with this. I kind of predicted the sentiments, but I couldn't stop thinking about this after I finished it. I'm incredibly keen to read In the Distance by Hernan Diaz. From what I've heard from the literary circles, In the Distance is maybe even more impressive than Trust. This book, it just feels like it should be a classic. It feels like a story older than time itself, greed, wealth, and the associations that we have with that. Definitely going to be seen as a classic. People won't feel guilty about spending the time that this book requires. You will get something out of it, and it's a great story ultimately, and I think that's what makes a good classic. Now we are on to whatever number we're on to. I will have a ticker on the screen, I am sure. The next, this is kind of more of an author, but I do have in mind what book I imagine that they're going to be known for. But I want to incorporate this author because I love a weirdo. I love a weirdo. I love a weirdo. I resonate with weirdos, and I think they're great. Make the world go round. So the author that I want to incorporate onto this list, and the book that I've read from this author, is The First Bad Man. But the book that I imagine that Miranda July is going to be known for is All Fours. God, this book blew up. Every single person that I have talked to that has read this book, no matter who they are, has loved this book. I want to read it so badly, but I know that line at the library is thick, okay? So I'm waiting. But I have read The First Bad Man and No One Belongs Here More Than You. I talked about July in my weird books list that I'm sure you've all seen. It's impressive to see where an author began, what they were known for, and what they're ultimately probably going to be known for. July is also a filmmaker and an artist, and that was where I first came across July. And then I started to read some of July's works. Very weird. No One Belongs Here More Than You is all short stories. The First Bad Man is like watching an improv set where somebody just says, okay, your word is candle, and people start talking about candles, and then it just completely goes off the rails and then somehow comes together. That is what The First Bad Man felt like. I haven't read All Fours, but I know it's more of a meditation on aging, what somebody's role is in life, and what's kind of expected out of us, with very odd elements. July is a look into this renaissance of just embracing oddity in writing. Obviously, that's been going on for a long time, and I'm sure a lot of the classics that we consider very tame now were impressive deviations from the norm, but I think that July is a very great look into contemporary oddness, odd man out, and making sure that that has a place and a popularity in the world of literature. July does it really well. Six, right? 6. Number 6 is also author. I've read the 2 books that I'm going to put on this list, and I think it's just, again, a presence that is going to give classic books, and that is Han Kang. I have read both Human Acts and The Vegetarian. I would say that The Vegetarian is probably the most notable book by Kang. I would say Human Acts is probably my favorite book by Kang. Human Acts is about the Gwonju uprising in the 1980s in South Korea, something that I literally had no idea about, and that is the power of fiction and storytelling. It can teach you so many things. The Vegetarian is about a woman who starts this very meticulous and obsessive diet, and people see it as a very disturbing book. I didn't necessarily see it as that, but I think it shifted the way that people read and access disturbing books, so mainstream and so debated about, that I think that that will make it a classic. Then I'm basing this off of the popularity that I saw in a video that I made last year, Your Favorite Books of the Year. I took and compiled information that all of my viewers gave me about their favorite books. This is an author who, I think specifically this book that I'm going to mention is going to be her classic, and that is Claire Keegan. Specifically, the book that I think is going to be a classic is Small Things Like These. This is like a historical little sliver of a book about choices that we're forced to make, and family and freedom of our bodies. The power of a small text like that is so impressionable to people. When you can read something so small, and again, it's so accessible for the average reader, that makes people confident to pick up that author again or pick up another book. Sometimes these classics are such daunting reads, but when you read a short, good classic and everybody can get enjoyment out of it, there's a power to that, and I think that that is what Keegan is doing so well. Small Things Like These, again, it's very pulling at your heartstrings, which is a recipe for a classic. It was one of the top books of my polling that I did last year, so I had to put it on the list because I also read it and I found great enjoyment. We're in the top 4. Okay. Number 4, and this is a book that I read a little while ago, and I didn't love it as much as everybody else did, but I can stand back and look at the absolute chaos emotionally that this book brought on people, and the frenzy and the attachment to these words. No One Belongs, what is that called? On Earth, We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. 100%, I'm going to say that this book is going to be considered a classic. I know people, this is like their Bible, and I love that. I love that. I love that this book made people so passionate. On Earth, We're Briefly Gorgeous just broke open this storytelling format and this very vulnerable way of expressing yourself, talking about sexuality in this bildungsroman sort of way that was really kind of, it was poetry. Ocean Vuong, oh my God, you listen to any interview and it's the sweetest, most charismatic and beautiful presence you can even imagine. I think that book will 100% be considered a classic. 100%. Top 3, okay? Now this is where it's gonna get a little dicey. A little dicey. And some people will be very upset, and I apologize. Not that much. This is going to be an author. I think a lot of her novels are going to be considered classics. A lot of her novels are hugely popular, and I think that they're good novels. And that is Ottessa Moshfegh. Specifically, the book that I have read of hers is Eileen. I haven't read My Year of Rest and Relaxation, which I imagine is probably going to be considered her most popular classic when all is said and done. But I really liked Eileen. That ending was wild. I've also read her short story McGlue, which was good, definitely good. You can read it in a day for sure. But I like that she dips into the macabre. She's not afraid of getting her hands dirty, and she has sensational sentences. She has a sensational way of creating these characters. In Eileen specifically, it's about a young girl who lives with her very domineering father, and this mysterious woman enters into the town and becomes very, very prevalent in the young girl's life. Why? Who knows what's going on? I haven't read My Year of Rest and Relaxation, but I imagine if I was to read the two, I might even prefer Eileen a little bit more. I think My Year of Rest and Relaxation, again, blew up, was hugely popular, people loved it, And I think that that will continue to translate into later generations. All right, the top 2. Have you been able to guess? Have you been watching along? Have you been saying, I think she's going to put these ones on the list? Because I hope you have. All right, the last 2 might be a little bit controversial, but I got to do it. Remember when I said that Trust was probably the most classic looking classic? Well, number 2 also fits into that category as well. My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. Now. This was, I know, the number 1 book on the New York Times 100 Greatest Books of the 21st Century, and I agree with that, sure. The reason that I didn't put this in number 1, this is, I think, a trilogy. I haven't read the entire series. I've only read My Brilliant Friend, the first book, about the young girls, a Bildungsroman in Italy. I liked it a lot. It's great. It's a very quick read. I wouldn't consider it as astounding as lots of people do. I read it. I thought it was great. I just didn't feel compelled to continue on. But I know that the girls progress. It, I'm assuming, kind of gets closer to modern age as the book storyline unfolds. This feels like the traditional structure of a classic. You have people growing up, learning life lessons, having these little facets of storytelling. The only reason that I don't put it at number 1 is because I think as we're entering into the digital era, as we're entering into 2000s plus, we're going to look at life differently, and we're going to maybe want a little bit more permanence of things that we see in our day-to-day life when we look back at classics that will be regarded as classics, if that makes sense. Again, it was hugely popular on social media, and I think that will continue to make it a go-to book for people generations to come. They had better still be reading. All right, and number 1. I chose an author who I'm not so in love with, who is not my favorite author of recent years. I've only read 1 book and I didn't really love it, but the reason that I put this author and her books at number 1 is because it is very much writing about our time, how we evaluate relationships, how we evaluate people around us when we have an infusion of technology that feels like maybe that is a better representation of who we are. And that writer is Sally Rooney. 100%. If it's not her writing talking about new age and life that we're currently in, she will be remembered as, I think, one of the biggest stars of social media. I didn't know who Sally Rooney was before I started talking about books online, but let me tell you, I knew who she was pretty immediately. A couple of clicks and you will find somebody reading one of her books online. Whether it's Instagram, whether it's TikTok, whether it's YouTube, she is pervasive in the online spaces. I think that even if you read science fiction, even if you read fantasy, even if you're reading YA, even if you're reading classics, you know of Sally Rooney. You know what she's doing. You know when her new book is coming out. And I think that the impact that she has had will last for a long time. And I think that people will continue to push and love her books. Like I said, I'm not a massive fan, but I can recognize that she's going to be here for a little while. I would actually love to know, out of her books that she's published, I've only read Beautiful World, Where Are You? Would you say that Conversations with Friends or Normal People are the most popular? What do you think? What do you think? So, what do you guys agree with? What do you hate? Let me know. I'm pretty okay with my list. I think that those ones are definitely classiques in the making. Girl, I'm about to be a classic, okay? Anyway, you guys are wonderful. You're fabulous. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you in the next one. These are clip-ons. I can't hide it anymore. These are clip-ons.